Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Dawn Platt. Today, we're diving into a topic that can be deeply personal and incredibly important. Recently, we received a heartfelt request from one of our listeners, a wife whose husband has dementia. And while previously we've discussed the experiences of daughters and daughter-in-laws, today's episode is dedicated to the unique challenges and experiences of having a spouse with dementia. We hope this episode offers you support, insight, and perhaps a bit of comfort to those of you walking this path. Let's get started. This podcast episode is going to be a series because I think it's just really that important. The series will be called Navigating Life with a Spouse Who Has Dementia. I can say in my career that this is probably one of the hardest things to see and sometimes the hardest things to support because of that relationship in the family with spouses. I know that it is difficult for a child, son or daughter, to have a parent who has dementia, and I can totally relate to that. But each one of us, according to where we are in the family relationship, are going to experience things a little bit differently, but the spouse is completely different. And so we're really talking about that partnership, which is lifelong. A child grows up, becomes an adult, and leaves home. But that spousal relationship is a lifelong relationship. And although difficult to navigate with any loss or any illness or sickness, dementia itself can be difficult to navigate. The title of today's episode is Heart to Heart, Supporting a Spouse with Dementia. I want to kind of give honor to this request because I think it's important to recognize that although we cover topics and although you may even have a support group that you go to, I think the spouse-to-spouse diagnosis is something that is unique, and it does require an understanding of that relationship and the loss that comes with it. So let's talk about the importance of discussing the challenges and experiences that are really unique to spouses. After your spouse has been officially diagnosed with dementia, the journey ahead will be filled with very unique challenges, including changes in communication, obvious memory loss, and some alterations in personality and behavior. These changes can be emotionally taxing for both partners. As a caregiver, it's crucial to understand the condition, seek professional support, and prioritize self-care to avoid burnout. Resources like the Alzheimer's Association, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, Dementia Society of America, the National Institute on Aging, and your local support groups can provide some emotional support and practical guidance. I always encourage seeking out these organizations so that you can educate yourself and become equipped and have a sounding board for what you're going through as an individual and as a family. By staying informed and connected, couples can navigate this journey more successfully, finding moments of joy and connection amidst all the changes that tend to come with the journey. I think that the elephant in the room really is at some point when a spouse has been diagnosed, that couple's approach becomes a singular approach. it becomes the responsibility of the spouse who does not have dementia to be that voice and carry out the decisions and the wishes of the one who's been diagnosed. And that in itself can be daunting because I think that although we can talk about it on the podcast, although you're going to find information on it, really it is quite the individual journey. And we all will handle this differently as the journey goes on. And so I want to really kind of explore some of that. So if you are in this situation or someone you know, that you can really be open and honest about that. The fact of the matter is that if your spouse had a heart attack or another common disease, I think that it's easier for friends and families and your church and your neighbors to really understand that process a little better. But when it comes to the dementia diagnosis, if those same individuals do not have the information or the education to know and understand this unique journey that can be different for every individual, it becomes a little bit more daunting and challenging to access that support and even talk about it. I do find that spouses are somewhat protective, maybe even embarrassed to talk about certain scenarios when it comes to dementia. It becomes difficult to separate the disease from the person. And I think that that's important to point out is that these things that we talk about are the dementia. They're not the person. They are not decisions that the person who has dementia just decides to do. They are an outcome of dementia, the disease, and the progression that it takes, which can be quite unique and individualized for each and every person. So I want to make note of that. You're not alone, and probably what you're going through is not uncommon. However, it could be quite unique, and being able to express yourself to others is something that I think will take practice. But certainly, I'm recommending that it is necessary. Dementia can significantly impact the people closest to those diagnosed, especially spouses, and in quite a different way. We as spouses grow into a lifestyle. And recently, I was with a couple who is experiencing a similar loss. And I realize when I'm around people that have been married for many, many years, how united they are as one. I mean, sometimes they not only finish others' sentences, but they really do act and move as one. So it's really not only a feeling of losing your spouse, but essentially a part of yourself. As dementia progresses, your spouse may no longer be able to perform certain tasks, such as balancing the checkbook, doing taxes, handling financial and legal matters and affairs, and even completing some household chores. Taking on these responsibilities can be challenging, but with the right support and resources, you can manage these changes and continue to provide the care your spouse needs. I want to stop here and really talk about this a little bit more because throughout my career and just knowing people that have been married a long time, there's certain tasks and duties in the household that people do. And it's really not something that we talk about all that often, but it could be as simple as taking out the trash. There is simple tasks in your household that maybe one spouse or the other does, such as cooking, paying the bills, grocery shopping, being the business person, the business oriented person. Tasks just get divided up like they do when you're raising a family, taking on some of these tasks that may seem simple, but maybe you've never done in your entire marriage can be daunting on top of navigating the dementia journey and all of those things that come with it. But because your spouse may not be able to perform these duties, it's really a great time to kind of take an inventory and find someone, a family member, or even your spouse, if they are able really to make this plan with you. That would be amazing if you could look at that early on so you can kind of make a plan. But managing household chores and household duties and bills and banking. I have coached families where the wife has never even written a check, really has no idea about managing their finances or even where the accounts might be. So these are things that are going to take a lot of guidance and really professional support as you begin to take them on. You may need to take on managing your entire household, caring for your family, making most of the decisions in your household and family, and providing an increased level of supervision and support for your spouse all at the same time. So, this can be a daunting position, especially if you aren't attuned to doing that or you don't realize that there are others that are doing this every day. You're going to encounter a need for changes. I've talked about this on the podcast before. Sometimes life changes, dementia changes, and things that we put as a priority really have to be examined. There are just some things that need to change, and that's going to help you navigate this process. You may find that taking on these new roles in your relationship and marriage may become less and less of an equal partnership. And how do we feel about that? I think it's common, and there's some common feelings that families and caregivers experience, spouses experience that are not unusual. Guilt, you can feel guilt. You might feel angry or frustrated. Certainly, grief is a very common emotion that a spouse can feel, and loss. Dementia has twists and turns. It can be a quick journey, it can be a long journey. And we may even find that we're losing piece by piece of an individual while they're still with us. And that can be difficult to navigate and to understand. So, having these open and honest dialogues with family members, with a therapist or counselor, with your pastor, whatever the case might be, is going to be very important. And then you're probably going to find that because your loved one has dementia, there is going to be a period where they're not going to understand this, and they may not be the person that you want to have this discussion with, because this kind of processing goes away with dementia itself. And so it's important to plan for these conversations, to plan for the roadblocks that you may encounter, and to understand that this is pretty normal, that you would feel this way. And gaining education and insight is going to give you a step up when it comes to navigating these obstacles successfully. With this proper support and education, I think that you as a spouse and caregiver can not only provide the best care, but maintain your own well being. I cannot dialogue enough that this is important. I think the focus is always on caregiving. It's always on doing the best thing. It's always on providing quality of care. But without self care, none of that will exist. It just doesn't. And I think that many spouses, many family members do not put themselves first, meaning you're not most important. However, the balance, the well being of your life is going to depend on you being in a good place emotionally, you being in a good place physically, spiritually. All of these things are going to make a difference on how you're able to cope and respond to this journey that you are on and that you are going to need to navigate. So don't neglect yourself. And don't think that you are putting yourself above your spouse when you take time to take care of yourself. It's the little things that will make the difference in how you are able to cope and how you're able to make decisions going forward. Here's some of the things that might help. And I think having an honest dialogue with somebody, or even on this podcast, having the dialogue with yourself, except that your marriage is going to change. That is true. In what ways it's going to change will depend on the individual. It will depend on diagnosis. It will depend on a lot of factors, including support and environmental factors. But there are going to be changes that you will need to navigate like any other disease. Locate financial and legal documents. Be prepared for what that looks like. Seek out a elder law attorney or financial advisor or a counselor or even a dementia coach to take a look at that, to have that ready when you're going to need it. Turn to family, friends, professionals, and community resources for assistance or education. You are going to be better off to get an arsenal of information, education, and resources at your disposal, whether or not you use them or whether or not you need them. It's really important to know ahead of time to kind of plan ahead of what's available instead of trying to do that in a crisis situation. Begin to make adaptations to make tasks easier. Things are not going to be done the same way continuously. You can definitely wear yourself out by trying to maintain the same pace or standards as when you had two people functioning in your marriage and in your household. And there are just things that will benefit you if you prioritize and allow change within this journey. Let someone else take on parts that you find difficult. You do not have to take on everything. Absolutely, you do not. And I think that this is the area where you need to plan ahead and you need to have discussions and you need to solicit support, whether it's family support, whether you hire support. This is all part of that initial and ongoing process. Don't overpromise to your spouse or even to your family. It's very easy to believe that you can and that you will, but there are going to be unexpected turns in this journey. Do the best you can and plan for what you can. But I think that understanding that you are probably going to encounter a few curves that you can take, but at the same time, you're going to have to navigate and do what you can when you can and not expect yourself to be able to perform in every area. Take the time that both of you need to adjust. It is a daunting, and I think in my next podcast in this series, I'm going to do some scenarios on some coaching with families of kind of each step that they went through and how they were feeling, both sides, the spouse that was diagnosed and the spouse who was now leading and taking the headship of this journey and making plans, what it felt like and how they navigated that scenario. I like to have people who have gone through this process on the podcast. So I will probably host a family or a spouse who is in those stages or in the middle of those stages. And then perhaps a spouse who have walked through those stages and what they have learned from it. Because I think that hearing from others that are where you are, where you've been, or where you're going to be is going to be very helpful as you walk this journey and make these decisions. I think that you have a lot of decisions to make, but you have a lot of options and I believe a lot of support. There are some common obstacles that are encountered when a spouse is diagnosed with dementia. And the partner is the one who generally will face these challenges. And how you do that is going to depend on being prepared and really taking a step back and looking at the larger picture. So let's talk about the top 10 most common obstacles encountered when a spouse has been diagnosed with dementia. Emotional stress and grief. I mean, this is daunting. Watching a loved one decline can be heartbreaking and lead to feelings of sadness, frustration, anger, and even helplessness. The spouses often experiences anticipatory grief, mourning, mourning the loss of what was, mourning the loss of the person they knew, and even having difficulty identifying with the person in front of them now. I've talked about this and I want to be real honest. There are personality changes that occur. There are little bits and pieces of our loved ones that dementia seems to take or cause to fade away. But yet you're sitting there looking at your spouse or your loved one, your parent, and you love them. And to you, they're the same. But in all actuality, dementia has stolen much of them. And that is difficult. It is heart wrenching to deal with, but understanding what is happening and really having a sounding board for that emotional feeling you're having, that stress or that grief, is really important. It's okay that you feel that way. I went through a gamut of feelings with my mother. I deal with families every day and throughout my career who have a gamut of feelings. Do not feel guilty about the emotional feelings that you're experiencing. Embrace them, talk about them, expound on them so that you can really walk through them. They're raw and they're real. And most people in your shoes do experience those types of emotions. Emotional stress can lead to a lot of anxiety, depression, and burnout. It's really important that you keep up your mental health and that you check yourself or have someone and give them the right to check you. Depression is daunting, and we see that it can be very common. And why wouldn't you be depressed at the loss of this precious person who you have spent your life with, who you have adored, and who you're devoted to? It's very normal, I think, to feel that. The reality is, are we going to tell someone? Are we going to reach out for help so that we can be as well as possible through this journey? And then the role reversal. The spouse has often taken on roles and responsibilities that now their partner has to manage and could be totally lost. I've talked about the checkbook, which in the early days, I was very shocked dealing with people who the wife actually had no idea about finances or had never paid bills or wrote a check. Her husband was the businessman and she was the housewife, may have had a job on the side, but her role was very different. This was very interesting as I began to work with people early in my career to realize that this could be so different than what we see today in a household where generally two people work and contribute to the household. Decision making. Boy, I don't know about you, but I like to talk about decision making, throw things off of one another, get some agreement, even brainstorming in and around decision making. And all of a sudden, you may be finding yourself as the sole decision maker. And how do you know you're making good decisions? I think that you may make mistakes. Again, give yourself grace, but seek out that family, friend, or professional support before making decisions. Try not to make decisions suddenly. And let me bring up here that you may make decisions and then find that they don't fit or aren't the right decisions, such as choosing a healthcare provider, such as choosing a program. They're not carved in stone. You can change your mind. You can change. You can, if you're renting or if you've chosen a community or an agency and it's not working out, you can fire them and hire a new physician. You can choose another healthcare agency. You can choose another community. I mean, those things are all within your powers. Don't be afraid to make a bad decision. Try and make the best decisions, but then adjust if necessary. I think that's going to be important. Financial management is something that I think is individual to the family. And obviously, my advice is if you do not have expertise in this area, that you do seek that out through your attorney, elder law attorney, or a trusted financial planner. Hopefully, you have done some of this as you have gone into retirement, or if it's a suddenly you have access to at least some counseling on financial affairs and also resources that might be available for the planning and healthcare needs of you and your loved one. And then household chores, things so simple as maintaining the utilities or the air conditioner or maintaining the car maintenance. These things can be uncommon for some of us who've never done it. What is that going to look like and how are you going to go about that? And don't let that become a total burden on top of what you're already dealing with. So balance these things out and seek outside assistance and direction for problem solving these areas. It can be overwhelming and challenging, especially when you're not accustomed to this. So it's not the first time this has happened, and there are many others that are in that same boat as you. That's again where a support group or a support mechanism can share their experiences and maybe what they have done, which will help you in making your decisions. Social isolation. I can relate to this in a lot of ways, but especially spouses over my career and especially dementia coaching, social isolation and loneliness is huge. I have worked with families that are so dedicated. They come to visit every morning, afternoon, and night, and they really have no life outside of taking care of or visiting their loved one if they happen to be in a memory care community. Social isolation and loneliness is real. It is something real that I think that many people face in this journey. Friends and family may not know how to interact with the person with dementia, leading to fewer social interactions and visits. They simply don't know what to do, and so they may tend to disappear or fade away. Be open and honest with what's going on and needs, and try and maintain some socialization and some relationships because it will provide you with long term benefits. Additionally, the caregiving spouse may find it difficult to leave the house or participate in social activities. And like I said, I have met spouse after spouse who is just always present, especially if they're in a community and spend all of their time there. Maybe they don't even take the time they need to get a haircut or get their nails done or run errands. And this can really, really isolate you and create loneliness and create isolation. And I will tell you myself, this is something that I had to balance myself because even with the care managing of my mother and my family relationships as well as my career, I found it very difficult to maintain a lot of friendships like I'm normally used to doing. But friendships can be forgiving. And so you want to do what you can to maintain those relationships because time will change and you're going to find that you need some socialization. You need that ear and you need to let people know what you're going through. I think most friends, if they understand what you're going through, that you haven't forgot them, that life is consuming, they're going to understand and be there when you need them. So really take some time if you can to nurture those relationships because don't lose who you are as a person. I find value in my friendships and relationships. I obviously had to let it go of a few that maybe required a little bit more maintenance because I simply didn't have time to be able to do that. But now that my mom has passed, I find myself wanting to get back in the swing of relationships and maintain those friendships that I have so valued over the years. So think about that as you're navigating this walk. Physical strain is another obstacle I think that spouses encounter. Providing physical care can be demanding, including helping with mobility, personal hygiene, and other daily activities can just wear you out. It's not something that you're necessarily used to. And so be careful that you're not overdoing it. Physical strain can lead to injuries and other health issues. So seek out support and help. If you are not experienced or you don't feel like you can do the physical part, try not to. Do not injure yourself. Do not injure your spouse. See what resources are available, even if they're a bather coming in twice a week, whatever the case might be. Financial burdens, we've talked about that, but I think when we look at the situation, healthcare costs are expensive. Medical treatments, medication, looking at care coming into the home, looking at a long term care community or a memory care, planning for this and the strain of finances can add stress. So be sure that you are seeking advice on this, that you are well informed, and that you're doing your homework on what is available to you. And don't wait too long to do that. Managing behavioral changes. Dementia can cause significant behavioral changes such as aggression, confusion, wandering, even sundowning, which is increased confusion and agitation that occurs in the evening. These behaviors can be challenging to manage and can increase the emotional and physical burden on caregiving spouses. One of the things that is not unique, it happens all the time, is that because we have been with this individual so long and because we know them, we often try and meet these new personality and behavioral changes with logic. And logic does not work with confusion. Reasoning does not work with confusion. And so, really take the time to join the podcast, get some resources on behavioral management and approach. It's going to save you and your spouse some heartache because you can't reason with confusion. Logic generally is not going to work, but understanding the process and how to approach, how to communicate, how to redirect are critical tools that you're going to want to know and to learn. And that's going to take time, but you can do it. That's all part of that learning and educational process. And then navigating healthcare systems, coordinating medical care, managing appointments, dealing with insurance can be not only complex, but time consuming. This again adds stress to you, can feel overwhelming, particularly if you are unfamiliar with the healthcare system or challenges that it does offer. Seek assistance with this, get a family member to help you, ask questions, decide what is most important and when. There's a uniqueness to your personal situation. And I think being aware and being able to make decisions that are best for you and your loved one at the right time are going to be important. Making decisions is a constant process. You will find that decision making starts at the beginning of the journey and continues to the end. There are difficult decisions that you will have to make. I don't always know that you'll be confident that you're making the right ones, but I think that you have to give yourself the benefit of the doubt and make the best decisions at the time about healthcare options, treatment plans, and even end of life preferences. And again, there are professionals out there who can assist you with that process. There are others who have gone through the process who can share. These resources are available throughout the Alzheimer's Association, Dementia Care of America. All of these types of organizations can really educate you when it comes to making those kinds of decisions. I think that you are always going to question whether you are making good decisions. You may go through doubt or guilt. And again, talking about it is going to be of huge benefit. You love this person that you're caring for. Let that guide you and try and do the best things that you can during the journey. I think that they're fortunate to have you. There are many people who do not have someone in that position. So think about it in that light, and I think it will be beneficial to you. And certainly balancing personal needs and caregiving. This is critical. Life work balance is critical, has been critical in your life, raising children. and life critical, but now you're in a different space and it causes a different requirement. And it's for a time period that no one really knows how long that period's going to be. Maybe 1 year, 2 year, it may be many years that you are going to have to balance it, but find time for self-care. Find time for hobbies and interests while caregiving. It's important. Take that time, whether it's an hour or two a week. Try and find that focus that is going to help you stay balanced in your approach. Neglecting personal needs can lead to burnout very, very quickly, and it will definitely negatively impact your mental as well as physical health. And out of that state, you are not going to be able to make good decisions. So put your personal needs first so that you can, out of that place, make the best decisions for you and your loved one. And then lastly is future uncertainty. This is something that no one can project for you because the progressive nature of dementia creates uncertainty about the future, including the progression of the disease and the long-term care needs. Talk to your physician. Ask questions of your social worker. Ask questions every time you can so that you can have a better idea of what is happening and what can you expect in the future. And as you walk this journey, the uncertainty itself can cause anxiety and make planning for the future challenging. You're not alone in this. This is something that many, many people go through. I know you may feel alone or you may isolate yourself. And that's why I encourage you to listen to the podcast, share the podcast, reach out to our resource page, and really know that we're here for you. The whole identity of the podcast is really for those of you who have dementia and those of you who are on the journey, this dementia path. Know that there are resources available, that there are not only friends and family who care about you, there are professional resources available in the town, city, state that you live in. Take time to do the research. And I hope that today in the podcast, I've talked about something that is impactful to the spouse. I will continue to do so in this series, Navigating Life with a Spouse Who Has Dementia. Until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode. Visit our website to suggest future topics and share the podcast with friends and family.